So Pier Giorgio Frassati was born in Turin, in the north part of Italy, on April the 6th, 1901. His mother, Adelaide Ametis, was a painter. His father was the founder and the director of an important newspaper in Italy, La Stampa, which was one of the most important newspapers. And he was also an Italian senator and ambassador to Germany. So Pier Giorgio was born in a prestigious family, a prominent family. And above all, his family was very strict and gave him a system of rules and duties to follow. But he was mysteriously thirsty for something more alive and meaningful. He was different from his sister, and the family understood him only after his death. They got to know him only when he died. They didn't know anything about him. You have to imagine, a big, rich house, with servants, and he was leading a regular, normal, ordinary life, I would say. But he was so special in what he was doing with the poor, but the family didn't know that. And Pier Giorgio absorbed the Christian life by immersing himself spontaneously and by personal choice in the living waters of the church, of which he himself felt a part, an active member, a branch attached to the vine. Pier Giorgio was part of many groups and associations such as the Apostolate of Prayers, the Eucharistic League, the associations of young adorers.
Of what was that last thing?
Adorers.
Adorers.
Adorers. And Third Dominican Order. And so he was educated. He educated himself above all in prayer. That is, possessing a Christian heart, a memory, a desire. He was, we can say, he was a beggar of the absolute.
A beggar of the absolute?
Of the absolute, of the divine.
Okay.
And at an early age, he obtained permission to receive daily communion, which was rare at the time. Above all, his existence had a center, daily communion. Are you a bigot? They asked him once at the university. This was the way in which Catholics were insulted by fascists, communists, and Freemasons. And he replied, "No, I have remained a Christian." One day, talking to a group of people, he said, quote, "With all the strength of my soul, I urge you young people to approach the communion table as often as you can. Feed on this bread of angels, whence you will draw all the energy you need to fight inner battles." Pier Giorgio had God at the center of all his actions. Everything started with the practice of daily communion. This appointment with the Lord was one he faithfully kept with few exceptions until he received his last Holy Communion on July 3rd, 1925, the day before his death at the age of 24. His sister Luciana, my grandmother, wrote, quote, "The power of Christ working in him every morning is the only explanation we can give to particular heroic acts of self-sacrifice and of charity, to his enormous spirit of humility, and to the moral astuteness of his life, unquote. Once in my own life, I was fortunate to meet a sister of charity, the congregation founded by Mother Teresa. And I asked her how they have the energy to help the poor. And I remember she told me that praying for 3 hours every day gave them the strength, the vision, the love. Well, Pier Giorgio was the same. He was no superhero. He was as anybody else, except that he was profoundly in love with Jesus, staring at him in order to have the light, the power, the guidance to bring his love to others. He knew that Jesus was the source of life, the eternal life. By receiving communion, he connected himself to the source of life. And this is where his story began. Many witnesses have described the sight of Pier Giorgio receiving the Eucharist. His reverence led one priest to exclaim, quote, "Behold a new young saint who cannot remain far from heaven much longer," unquote. And a friend of him, Attilio Amadeo, once said, "I would see Pier Giorgio in church every morning, going to communion and praying, always kneeling in his pew, so absorbed, so concentrated on what he was doing, that I was sure that he wouldn't have been disturbed if a bee would have stung him. Every time I saw him going to the altar to receive communion, the thought occurred to me that one day I would like to attain his purity of soul, so that I could receive the sacrament with the same enthusiasm and intensity. I noticed how he faithfully spent a long time making his thanksgiving after Holy Communion, praying with such fervor that I was amazed," unquote. So Pier Giorgio nurtured his devotion in the Eucharist by spending frequent hours in adoration, often during the night. On some occasions, he would spend the night in his mountain clothes before leaving early in the morning for an excursion. He had a reputation for being riotously funny, but in the chapel before the Lord, he was intensely focused. Father Tommaso Castagno, who was a priest, friend of Pier Giorgio, once wrote, "I remember Pier Giorgio well during adoration one night in the Turin Cathedral. He was kneeling on the floor trying to pray as other young people were brushing past him as they went to and from communion. Melted wax dripped from the candles onto his suit coat, and he didn't seem to notice it at all, so absorbed was he in his prayers. Then I understood what communion and a Eucharistic life meant to him." At the age of 17, he joined the St. Vincent de Paul Society and dedicated much of his spare time to serving the sick and the needy, caring for orphans, and assisting the demobilized servicemen returning from World War I. He decided to become a mining engineer, studying at the Royal Polytechnic University of Turin, so that he could, quote, "serve Christ better among the miners." During a stay in Germany, he had seen the workers' great working conditions. He said, quote, "I want to help my people in the mine, and I can do this better as a layman than as a priest, because in our country the priests are not in contact with the people. So he was very much aware of reality. He was not living in a dreamy dimension. He knew how things were. And one day he said, around the sick, the poor, the unfortunate, I see a particular light, a light that we do not have. This is impressive. So he could see Christ in the poor. He could see this light. This is a grace. Mm-hmm. This is a gift. When you meet poor people and somehow you see this light in them. His eyes were open to the great mystery of the presence of our Lord in the poor. He also said, quote, Jesus comes to me every morning in Holy Communion. I repay him in very small way by visiting the poor. So what little he did have, Pier Giorgio gave to help the poor, even using his bus fare for charity and then running home to be on time for meals. The poor and the suffering were his masters. And he was literally their servant, which he considered to be a privilege. His charity did not simply involve giving something to others, but giving completely of himself. He once said, quote, we have the duty of putting our health at the service of those who do not possess it. To act otherwise would be to betray the gift of God. The help he gave to the poor was fed by daily communion with Christ in the Holy Eucharist and by frequent nocturnal adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. I'm saying this again and again because this was the center. Mm-hmm. This was the source. Mm-hmm. And Pier Giorgio's best friend, Marco Beltramo, once wrote, quote, we can't understand the spirituality of Pier Giorgio if we don't understand his love for the Blessed Virgin Mary. So his love for Our Lady was one that began at an early age and grew as he did. He was known for bringing fresh flowers to his beloved Madonna of Europa in every kind of weather. He would often fall asleep on his knees praying the rosary in his bed, by his bed. Friends recount how he would lead the rosary when they were on retreat, on trains, on the mountains. He always carried a rosary with him and gave them as gifts to friends. As a lay Dominican, he would pray the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary on the streets and going to and from school. And according to my grandmother, he consecrated himself to the Blessed Mother in May 1918, when he was 17 years old. So he developed a deep spiritual life, which he never hesitated to share with his friends. He never lost the chance to lead his friends to Mass, to the reading of Scripture, and to praying the Rosary. Mountain climbing was one of his favorite sports. Outings in the mountains, which he organized with friends, also served as opportunities for his apostolic work. On the back of the photo, which shows him holding onto the rock, gazing up toward the goal, he later wrote, verso l'alto, which in English means toward the top. It's a short phrase that was the synthesis of his way of life, which means seeking what enhances, that which carries us beyond ourselves, toward the best we can be as people. It is to strive toward the perfection of life, in other words, toward sainthood. It means to strive toward the source of life, that is God. Just before receiving his university degree, Pier Giorgio contracted polio, which doctors later speculated he caught from the sick whom he tended. Neglecting his own health because his grandmother was dying, after 6 days of terrible suffering, Pier Giorgio died at the age of 24, July 4, 1925. His last concern was for the poor. On the eve of his death, with a paralyzed hand, he scribbled a message to a friend asking him to take the medicine needed for injections to be given to Converso, a poor sick man that he had been visiting. Pier Giorgio's funeral was a triumph. The streets of the city were lined with a multitude of mourners who were unknown to his family. The poor and the needy whom he had served so unselfishly for 7 years. Many of these people, in turn, were surprised to learn that the saintly young man that they knew had actually been the heir of the influential Frassati family. So I know that for my family it was kind of a shock. You have to imagine this rich and powerful family at the funeral, seeing this huge crowd of people,
So they didn't know that he had been working with the poor.
They didn't know, or they take it as, something boyish or
A phase.
Yeah. So so they didn't have they didn't know how great he was. And what struck me about my uncle is that he was truly in love with Jesus, that his eyes were fixed on him. Pier Giorgio once wrote in a letter, quote, "The fate given to me in baptism suggests me surely, by yourself you will do nothing. But if you have God at the center of all your action, then you will reach your goal." On another occasion, he said, quote, "I ask you to pray a lot for me because I desperately need from God the grace to carry out my projects to good effect. Only prayer can obtain from God the desired improvement." Pier Giorgio was different in that he wasn't just enthusiastic, but he communicated through his eyes, his words, his smiles. He still does through the photographs. I'm sure you saw some photographs of him. His radiant face, his strong features, bright and welcoming smile. He wrote to his sisters, to my grandma once, quote, "You ask me whether I am in good spirits. How could I not be, so long as my trust in God gives me the strength? We must always be cheerful. Sadness should be banished from all Christian souls. For suffering is a different thing from sadness, which is the worst disease of all. It is almost always caused by lack of faith. But the purpose for which we have been created shows us the path along which we should go, perhaps strewn with many thorns, but not a sad path. Even in the midst of intense suffering, it is one of joy." And this is how he lived till the last minute. In the last days of his life, he was in great sufferance, physical sufferance. And he was abandoned. in his room.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this.
Because they didn't know he was so sick.
They didn't know he was so sick. They didn't know he was dying. They thought that he was just not coming to dinner.
Uh-huh.
He was maybe he had some kind of flu.
Right.
Yeah, so my connection to Pier Giorgio is through faith and community. It is very mysterious. Pier Giorgio was a mystic who had a strong, mysterious urge to be near the Blessed Sacrament. And I can feel from his presence when I stare at the Blessed Sacrament during adoration. He's a traveler companion, and this is how it should be for all those who, I believe that saints call us. We are called by some saints to be our companions. Not all the saints,
sure,
but some particular ones, there is a statement of his that I hold dear more than any other. Quote, "To live without fate, without a heritage to defend, without battling constantly for the truth, is not to live, but to get along. We must never just get along." So he thought that we must not just exist, we must live, which is different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy because we are constantly attacked by forces that want to put us down. So it's our struggle in life. So I'd like to end this short talk about Pier Giorgio sharing a prayer that Pier Giorgio had copied by hand and hung on the door of his room. It's St. Bernard prayer to the Virgin, taken from Dante, Divine's Comedy. Virgin Mother, daughter of my Son, humble and high beyond all other creature, the limit fixed to the eternal counsel. Thou art the one who such nobility to human nature gave, that its creator did not disdain to make himself its creature. Your womb relit the flame of love. Its heat has made his blossom seed and flower in eternal peace. To us, you are a noonday torch of charity, while down below, among those still in flesh, you are the living fountainhead of hope. Lady, you are so great and prevail above. Should he who longs for grace not turn to you, his longing would be doomed to wingless flight. Your loving kindness does not only aid whoever seeks it, but many times gives freely what has yet to be implored. In you clemency, in you compassion, in you munificence, in you are joined all virtues found in any creature. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Thank you. That's
Thank
really.
you for that. So I was wondering, so you said that his family didn't really understand him until after his death,
Yeah.
right? So they obviously saw his devotion, his love for the Eucharist. Did they just think, did they think anything extraordinary of it at the time, or just that he was a particularly pious young man? Like, where did he get that from? It just, if his family didn't really understand him.
Well, they were stunned. They didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
They thought he was just as any other student, going out with friends. Of course, they knew that he was that he used to pray the rosary every day, that he went to adoration, that he went to church, but they,
It is like the full breadth of it all.
yeah, they, you know, they didn't care very much about religion, so they couldn't understand what was happening. You know, how can you understand someone who believes and who loves Jesus if you don't know Jesus?
That's very true.
And because it was a rich and wealthy family, you know, they were interested in politics, culture. They were traveling. My grandmother married an ambassador in Poland. This is why I have a Polish name.
Okay.
And so they were concerned about other things. And my grandmother wrote a few books about him. And she was, for many years, she felt guilty for not having understood that he was dying. And he was by the next room. He was. They didn't get it. Right? They didn't get it. And he didn't want them to be worried for him. So he kept silent. He
just never complained.
He never complained. He was just laying in bed. And
Did his parents become more devout in their faith after his death?
his father, after a few years, had a conversion.
And then your grandmother, his sister.
Yeah, and my grandmother, yeah.
Okay.
And my grandmother spent her whole life collecting informations, documents, and testimonies about him. And not only she wrote some books, but she provided all the materials to the church for the canonization. And today it's incredible. He is known all over the world, and people from many countries are so devoted to him. You know, he's really a presence. And this is a mystery. How could that happen?
He's very popular in the United States.
He's very popular.
Well, especially with how short his life was.
Exactly. Yeah. So that means that God is very creative. So God used and is using his young life to reach people. And this is a great mystery.
I'm interested too. I'm talking about like saints calling people, right? And was there, so obviously Pier Giorgio was so devoted to the Eucharist, had a deep love for the Blessed Virgin. Were there any other saints that he was particularly devoted to? I know that you said he was Third Order Dominican.
Yeah.
Saint Dominic.
Yes, Saint Dominic for him was very important, and I don't know the name in English, but Gerolamo Savonarola is a man. He as a Dominican lay, he took the man of Gerolamo.
Okay.
And he grew up with the Jesuits, but at the same time he became a third Dominican. So he was in the church, but he didn't belong to just to one group or. And he cared a lot for his friends. So for him, friendship was very important. And they could see this extraordinary man. But you know, when you see things like that, maybe you took them a little for granted. until death comes. When you lost these things, then you think, oh, that was special.
I had a couple questions. You've
Yes.
already answered a lot of them. What does it mean to be a person of the Beatitudes, and why did John Paul II call him that?
Well, because he incarnated the 8 Beatitudes. The most important for me, in my opinion, from my point of view, is blessed are the poor. Because, as I said, he perceived himself as a beggar, which is the beginning of sainthood. When you are in the presence of the Lord, just begging for His grace, and so I think that was the beginning. Yeah.
Okay. And how can young people or anyone today follow his example in the modern world? Maybe you've already said a lot of this.
No, well, I think that young people should have the occasion to know his life, see his photographs, and listen to someone who was touched by his presence. Of course, he was helping the poor, he was praying, but maybe for someone who doesn't know him, it's not sufficient to say that he was helping the poor and that he was praying. You have to somehow tell a story, and so that people's young imagination can be lit. It's important to imagine him. So this is why I think photographs are so important.
Well, I know you already answered this one. What does "to the heights" mean? What would you like people to know about him? I think you've already said a lot, but is there anything that you would like people to know about how he might inspire them to grow in their faith?
Well, I would like people to know that we should spend time in front of the Blessed Sacrament. Just stay there and humbly wait to be touched and be inspired. This is what he did. So going to the source. And
I wrote down this quote: "The greatest joy is to give oneself." Would you say that pretty much sums up his life?
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. That was he felt that Christ was giving himself to him, and in response his answer was to give himself to the others. So there was a dynamic. He was going to Christ every day. He was staying there. He was receiving something, and in him it was echoing this love towards other people.
Maybe just for you, I mean, just having a soon-to-be canonized saint in your family, did you always, did you grow up like realizing that, or did you learn about Pier Giorgio from a young age, or was there a certain moment in your life where it just kind of all hit you, or whatnot?
Well, for me, it it was very difficult because when I was a child, my grandma and my aunts were constantly speaking about Pier Giorgio, but they were ignoring us as nephews. So my grandma was very distant. And I remember as a child asking myself, how come they constantly talk about someone who's not here and they can't see us? So that somehow kept me away from Pier Giorgio for a long time. So I got to know him later, and I'm still on that way. I'm still learning, to yeah, it's sometimes it's not easy to have a saint in your family.
Imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like it's such a process too, right? Going through all the canonization and compiling the documents and
Yeah.
things like that, just the work that goes into that. I guess I never would have, but we have someone who's totally devoted to that. It can create a certain distance in there from the people who are actually with you.
Yeah.
How old were you when you finally started to grow in your faith and kind of grow in your relationship with Christ and with Him?
Well, my relationship with Christ started at a very early age,
Okay.
I would say. But my connection with Pier Giorgio came in my late 30s. So it took a while.
And are you excited now about all the canonization?
Yeah.
Are you going to get to participate in a
Yes.
lot of that?
Yeah, I'm happy about that. Yeah.
That's
The body of Pier Giorgio was
Santa Maria.
in Santa Maria Minerva up until today. And yeah.
So, this is not about Frassati, but so how communion and liberation, has that been a big part of your spiritual life? For me,